When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some we shouldn't.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Take it away, boys.
And thank you. Take it away. We shall. Hello, Tim.
Hello, that's me.
We got someone else to say hello to here. Let me introduce our guest, our very, very special guest. First time on our show for episode 181, covering Crimes of the Future. He is the co-host of the podcast Beyond the Screenplay, which do check out if you haven't. He is a fellow filmmaker to Tim and myself. He and I have many a co-production, including he and I co-wrote the horror short Forced Falls together. So there's a bit of a horror touch from him, and his sci-fi short film Stealing Time has now crossed over 4 million views on YouTube. So here he is, the man who just asks that films simply offer an experience above all else, Mr. Alex Calleros. Hello, Alex.
Hi. I love that I came with like a defining quote. That was great. I love it.
You came here, you came with the quote. That's how we do it. So, Crimes of the Future, the new David Cronenberg joint, following we covered Shivers on our episode.
That's right.
Far. Yeah. And so, Alex, I think just based off of, we watched together the 1999 Cronenberg film Existence once.
We did.
And just had a fun time doing that.
Yes.
So we thought, hey, new Cronenberg, perfect time to get Alex on the show here. But before that, anything else? And then we'll get into the trailer.
No, was Shivers Cronenberg's first feature film?
I believe it came before Rabid, yeah.
So that means we have all of his catalog to watch between these two films.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a fun, quite the bridge,
yeah,
quite the career retrospective here. Actually, yeah. Before we get into the trailer, Alex, how about what is your kind of context or relationship to horror, and then let's put it down into body horror / Cronenberg.
Big question. Yeah, I mean. So with horror, I'm not as hardcore as you guys, where I am not going to just sit down and watch any horror movie ever because, I just, there's so much to watch, and I like all sorts of genres, and horror is one of them. And I think with horror, my favorite horror movies are, as you kind of implied, Ryan, movies that give me a new experience. So, I can kind of get tired if it's just like, I'm just kind of looking for the genre tropes and just doing the same old thing again. I want a new experience. And that's why movies like Midsommar in recent years checked my boxes. That was a horror movie that I went to the movie theater and I sat down and I had a brand new experience, and it was glorious. And so that's always what I'm looking for in any movie. And I think a horror movie that can show me something new, that can make me feel brand new feelings, is always really exciting. And, I did a recent Cronenberg encounter I had was not with David, but with his son, watching Possessor, which I actually did enjoy quite a bit.
Okay. We have not seen that.
I really want to see it.
Okay. Yeah, you should watch it. But yeah, so with David Cronenberg and, body horror in particular, I think I've seen just a few of his films. I'm not actually a big aficionado of his movies, but Existence, or however you're supposed to say it, is one of my favorites, I think, of his, because I think it's a mix of the body horror and also more sci-fi, mind-bending kind of, are we in a dream? Are we not in a dream? Where are we? Kind of storytelling. Yeah. And so that really hit my sweet spot of both the kind of weird, freaky, technology and weird orifices and sex, but also video games and dreams and reality. So that was a real sweet spot for me of Cronenberg. And this movie was interesting because it definitely harkens to some of those Existence, like Videodrome vibes, but also is a very different feeling than I remember Existence having. So yeah, lots to talk about.
Had you seen any of his sort of non-body horror films?
Yeah, I saw History of Violence.
Okay.
I missed out on Eastern Promises, and I haven't seen what's the other one with Robert Pattinson. Yeah, a lot of his recent movies I haven't seen. So yeah, I've mostly just seen a couple of his early ones, his like body horror things, and History of Violence. But I am not up on my Cronenberg, to be honest.
That's fine. We're just looking for context, is all. Great. Well, I think that's the perfect opportunity then to move into our trailer to further set the tone here. So yeah, here we go. From 2022, written and directed by one and the same David Cronenberg, Crimes of the Future.
I can feel you pulling things around in there.
It's a brand new organ. Never before seen. We've all felt that the body was empty. Empty of meaning. And we've wanted to confirm that, so that we could fill it with meaning.
The world is a much more dangerous place now that pain has all but disappeared.
Surgery is sex, isn't it?
Is it?
You know it is. Surgery is the new sex.
I don't like what's happening with the body. In particular, what's happening with my body.
All right. There we go.
Those are greatest hits of the movie.
Yeah, I definitely avoided the trailer before seeing it. Cool. Great. All right. From our trailer, we move on to our ratings per our rating system. So our guest, what would you tell Alex in regards to this film if you/he hadn't seen this? Would you tell yourself to to avoid this film, stream it, rent it, or buy it?
The stream versus rent is a hard middle ground to land on, because the stream is like no cost besides the monthly fee you're already paying, so there's less commitment. So talking to myself, you're saying?
Yeah, and you can maybe kind of arrive at that answer. How was your experience going to see this film?
I'm like between a stream and a rent. Like, I think it was worth seeing, but if it was already available on Netflix, yeah, go that route. Is my general first instinct there.
Great. How about you, Tim?
I think I'm a rent. I'm like a hearty rent. It kind of does a lot of the stuff that I particularly like in mood and body horror or gratuity, and like lots of layered commentary that I was getting that I quite liked, but I don't think it's like a great movie, which is sort of a weird way to think about it, but I enjoyed watching it, but like I don't think I would watch it a bunch. So I'm a rent.
Yeah, ditto. My experience, I think, mirrored yours. I mean, it's just you can just chew on this for metaphors just endlessly, it feels like, from so many angles. And that's what really gets me, on top of what, like you said, the mood. I was a little held up in a couple regards, which we'll get to in the appropriate section. But I feel like just kind of, I always make this clarification with a lot of our, I don't know, a certain ilk of horror that we watch, where I'm like, maybe this was just because of a first time viewing. Like I saw David Cronenberg's Crash for the first time in the last year. And I mean, when it ended, I was just kind of like this, where I was just like, what do I feel right now? What is this? But then that feeling just sticks so much with me,
I feel that way. I watch Eastern Promises like every couple of years now, and every time it ends, I'm like, "What was that?" I love it, but that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's like, yeah, I really liked that, but that's it. It's an interesting way to.
This one for sure. That was my like. It ended, and I was like, oh, all right. What do I think?
Right. Well, and that's why I say, like, sometimes that reaction for me means when then I know to view it from that lens on a second viewing, it's like, oh, the things I was maybe lacking are actually there because it was just so much on a first viewing.
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll get into that more, but we gotta stream in a couple rents here. All right. And from here, just to sort of further get on the same page, we like to get on with the summary.
Oh God.
So, Alex, we'd love to give you the honors to steer the ship. And this is really just so we all can get on the same page. For our listeners who, whether they've seen the film or not, all that, but we are here to play assist as well. So as you know, on the briefer side, but do what you will. What was this movie, and what was the story of this film?
It's a kind of unstructured, wandering movie about a not too distant future in which we have alleviated pain from just the human experience and also infections. So the new sex is surgery. The new extreme experience is cutting up your body and changing your body in really extreme ways. And there's this phenomenon of people who are going. There's a term. It was advanced or something evolution, accelerated evolution. People growing new organs that seem to be of no use and are just kind of getting in the way. And so we got Viggo Mortensen plays Saul Tenser, who is one of these accelerated evolution people who is growing new organs for no apparent reason. And he has a partner, Caprice, played by Léa Seydoux, and she is a surgeon who uses some beetle-looking device that he lays in to extract his unnecessary organs as part of a performance art piece. And they are famous performance artists in this weird new world in which people are doing things to their bodies because they don't feel any pain and no infections. And ultimately, the movie ends up in a place where there's, I guess, kind of a political or social upheaval on the way, because perhaps these organs are growing for a reason, because we are evolving to eat the industrial waste of our society and plastic. And I guess the government doesn't want that to be known or wants to cover it up. And so there's kind of a conspiracy going on. And maybe Saul Tenser is one of these people who is growing the ability to eat plastic. And maybe he does at the end.
That seems about right.
Yeah, I honestly can't think what to add.
That's a really good description.
Yeah. You got there's that main one they're working up to at the end. We got K Stu as Timlin. Sorry, Tim, I won't get over that. Is Timlin sort of has like kind of like has is like a super fan, I guess, of
both strangely a very like by the book government bureaucrat at times, but then also kind of aroused and excited about the performance art. And she's the one who says the line, surgery is the new sex.
Yeah.
Very interesting character. Her performance reminded me, gave me Twilight vibes, which I found really funny. Just
great.
Just the kind of the delivery of some of the lines was very Twilighty.
Well, whether that worked or not, I think we can get into, because I think we're ready for our next big section here. All right.
I'm ready.
Cool. Here we go. What worked?
What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Well, yeah. So to directly continue, was that a good or bad thing that reminded you of Twilight, her performance?
It was weird at first because I was wondering why that she was making that choice. But as the movie went on and it became clear that this was also really kind of satire, and yeah, it felt very much like the movie was also a comedy. Then her really heightened performance made more and more sense and felt more and more right, especially in that scene where she kind of corners Saul Tenser in that room, and that scene that ends with him saying, "I'm not very good at the old sex." So yeah, it eventually kind of added up for me, but the movie in general, the performances were really all over the place as far as different actors kind of taking a different approach as far as how seriously they seem to be taking the character, or like how heightened the reality actually was. So yeah, it was a little bit disconcerting because I couldn't tell if she was in the same movie as Viggo Mortensen all the time, or Léa Seydoux, or anybody. So yeah, that both worked and didn't work for me. But as far as what worked for me, I did like that this took place in a future with this what if. It really was a movie exploring a what if question about the future and going to all the weird places that what if could lead. And I also did really appreciate how thematic it was. It was obviously just really interested in exploring a lot of different themes and ideas. And that is, I think it's the movie's strong suit is the thought-provoking ideas, and kind of like, yeah, the vibe and the kind of extreme internet malaise kind of feeling of it, of just, we're in this like nihilistic, everything is extreme, so nothing is extreme, just wasteland. and that felt very resonant. so I think the themes and the vibes and the what if question that it really went all the way on, I really appreciated.
Great. Well, I see that kind of as a bullet point or a list of bullet points, because here at Dismembering Horror, we like to dismember each one of those very, very deeply. So out of those sort of ones, what's on your mind, Tim? We talked performances, theme, and mood.
Oh man, where to begin? I would say the thing that jumps out to me right away is, I mean, it's all kind of interwoven with those things. Like from the performance point of view, I actually quite liked how weird and different people are in the movie, because it seemed like maybe there was an attempt to sort of have this commentary that a lot of the quote unquote like government official like people, the bureaucrats and the cop and the people who are sort of potentially on the side of that spectrum, what do you want to call it, are the ones that are kind of getting off the most on this, but not able to engage in it. And so that to me, I was like, that's what I was getting from Timlin's performance, or what's her name? Kristen Stewart?
Yeah, I call her K-Stu.
K-Stu, right. Yeah, from her performance, I kind of got this sort of commentary. I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that the caricature component of performances in this felt very much like a direct commentary at certain big ideas. So like with her, I kind of got this thing of like her being almost representative of the hypocrisy of so many like elected officials in our world and in history, where they beat the drum of some sort of like dogma, and then like in the privacy of their home are just like completely going in the opposite direction, or like they're just super hypocritical in like between what they say and what they do. And I kind of was getting that vibe from her, also from her colleague a little bit, the same thing, where he's like showing up and he's super titillated by it, but he's like trying to stay buttoned up, but he can't resist going up and fangirling over all of it. So like there's that whole swath of things. And then on the artist side of it, all this commentary on the art world and how art is perceived, especially fine art and performance art, and how it's just a very strange world that I mean, I've dipped my toe in it over the years, but now I'm with a fine artist. And so I'm like way more exposed to it. And I was like, she, of course, would not be good to see this movie because she, like, any slicing and dicing and she's out. So good that she didn't see it. But I think she would have been like super triggered, not by just the blood, but by the art commentary aspect of this.
Yeah.
So I really like this sort of broad stroke kind of, I guess, storytelling, to be very general about it. But then to sort of pick away at those broad strokes, just the thematic stuff of like you're saying, the what if questions, I actually really like all of that stuff, because like one of my first reactions too was it's almost a little bit of a the title itself is ironic, because it felt maybe more accurate to call it Crimes of the Past, being that this is where we're gonna get to if we keep doing dumb things. And I mean, I like all of the themes. I like this notion that not even going into the metaphor of it, but that we as humans, when we don't have pain anymore, what do we have to, what context do we have for pleasure? Right? So like, what is the inverse of pain? What's the pleasure side of the spectrum being based off of, if you don't have pain to say, okay, that feels bad, so what feels good?
Right. And this is taking it so far that pain is just pleasure now.
Right. And I think that's really a cool just construct to think about. And then what was the other thing? Oh, and then of course the sort of concept of man, there's so much going on.
We can stay one thing at a time here. I've a lot.
Well,
I want to say on all
true.
this.
The one thing the big thing is the thing of the, like, if we as humans can start consuming our waste, our plastic, our, all of the things that we've done to destroy the earth, like that's the next big, like, social political movement. And that whole idea, I love that there's such this ambiguity of like what's good and what's bad. Like who's the hero of this film, right? Like Scott Speedman actually, like, is what he's trying to accomplish ostensibly actually is a good thing, but like he's getting hung out to dry because that's so against the norm. And like that is the construct for all social movements, right? Like the most of the population is not ready for change. And so they push really hard against it, and we call people who want change extremists. But like sometimes the change is super necessary and a very important good thing for humanity. And often in history, those good, progressive sort of fights have been squashed.
Right. And so this is, in this context, it's humans evolving to eat plastic and weird purple waste bars. And I could see how that was an example of like, is this good or is this bad, in the context of like, this is a solution to a problem of like, food's scarce now, real food. So you can look at it as like, oh, this is just a solution to that. But yet that's so depressing at the same time. So we're just like, well, what about the underlying issue here? Like we want to fix, climate change, not just keep building ourselves in bubbles or, whatever, these sort of outward solutions. Yet through this evolutionary lens, it makes you sort of go, okay, well, if you're just evolving to something different that can exist with this just as much, generations go by, this is beautiful and normal to them. Is that such a bad thing? Is it just being nostalgic for this previous beautiful world that we think is inherent to our well-being?
Yeah, I mean, like just hearing you guys talk about it, like having other brains sort of contextualize it, to me, really, everything in the movie points to a very simple theme of the resistance to change, right? Like people who are growing new organs, like everybody in the movie, well, not everybody, but most everybody in the movie is resistant to that. They're like meddling with that.
Well, even the people who are accepting of it as a new, exciting art form, and this is a cool thing, they're treating the organs as like, yeah, because you're new, they're bad. I mean, that got into me. That was kind of the in for the theme that stood out. I don't think it's a main one, but really stood out to me as interesting was that idea that these people who he's growing new organs and treating them as pieces of art, but it just felt like how they reacted to them. It was this default, like, oh, it's a bad thing, remove it, which I kept thinking like, well, don't you want to keep them in? I mean, don't you want to also entertain the assumption that they're doing something good for you?
But the status quo, the machines that have been built in this new world are telling you that those are bad.
Right.
So the status quo is saying change is bad. Don't be different. Don't evolve.
Well, it was like a step away for me from like, people get appendicitis, get their appendix removed. And that's sort of, I don't know, the outlook to that is like, yeah, no, you do fine. Almost this like, you don't need it. And that to me, it's like, no, is it that you don't need it and it's not functional? Or is it that we don't have a full understanding of it yet, which I think is what it is.
I do think in the context of the world of the movie, it's not pleasant when these new organs are coming in, like there's these special chairs to help you like swallow your food and eat, which it doesn't even make sense the way they're working, but it's David Cronenberg wanted the flesh chair. But I think it makes sense that it's a painful evolution. It's not pleasant. It doesn't feel right as the transformation is happening. And Saul Tenster, I think his motivation is spelled out as he is, I guess, going to the cops to be an informant, specifically because he doesn't like what's happening to his body and that this is happening at all. So I think it makes sense that people would be against this experience because it seems wrong. But there's like this birth on the other side of it where, and there's almost like a immaculate birth kind of idea in this movie where it's like the first child born naturally with a plastic consuming digestive system. It's treated almost like it's a trope, like almost like in Children of Men, it's the first baby born in 18 years or whatever. It's like this shouldn't be possible, but it is. And because it is so miraculous and would change everything, it has to be destroyed and covered up and hidden.
Totally.
Specifically by like institutions, like government institutions, which is a pretty, big recurring thing in in everything.
Right. Well,
history, literature, whatever.
I just thought that it was interesting that the question was in place, at least for me. What if the thing that's making him sick is that he's not allowing all these organs to fully like stay with him?
He's not letting nature take its course. He's trying to fight nature and stave off whatever is like destined to happen.
Yeah.
It's such a snake eating its tail sort of theme thing too, because humans blew up the world enough to make them into this state that is now growing new organs, but it's all causal, right? Like they caused that and they're fighting against that, but the answer is to accept that, and that's what's going to like circle us back around to being in maybe a good place again. So I just like that there's this it's pretty grim, let's be honest. But I like that.
It was surprising to me, honestly. You're going into this movie knowing very little about it. I was not expecting an ecological message in this movie, and there to be this almost like feeling of hope at the end, or kind of it was very, very surprising that was in there, because I thought it was just going to be a total, just sadistic, just gross out, like look how depraved these people are, which is all in there as well. But it wasn't just depravity. There was some other higher meaning behind it all, which was very interesting.
I don't know if it's so much a Yeah, the meaning is in there, but as far as intended meaning, and just maybe this is just projecting knowing about like kind of Cronenberg's takes on his own work, but he just sort of sees it all as being real and beautiful and fascinating. So there's less of a sort of good, bad lens over everything, which I think for a story like this and horror, and maybe almost like any kind of good movie in a sort of sense, like I want that ambiguous ending, the graduate ending, that's what a lot of what great horror does. So yeah,
I do appreciate this movie. It doesn't feel like it judges anybody. It's like there's no judgment for this person who's cutting up her face or this guy who's sewing ears all over his body. It's just kind of like, this is just what's happening now in this time in the future.
Maybe that's what's like Cronenberg's real strength, is that he really is good at presenting a lot of sort of duality, character and broadly, and so much of how it's presented just leaves it for us to judge, right? Like we get to decide if it makes us uncomfortable. And like, I mean, there were people who apparently walked out of this in Cannes, like in the screenings for of this at the festival and stuff.
And apropos, people, the rest of the crowd who gave it a 6-minute standing ovation.
Right. And I think that that's pretty exciting in a way to be like, well, I mean, I guess that's kind of the point, right? Like you want to affect the audience and let them be the ones who are deciding how they feel about it. So good job. You did it.
Well, I'd be curious, for you guys, and just sort of, maybe last bit on theme here, but just to at least mention, see what you guys think of this. Like the other main theme coming through, as far as I could tell, is from the lens of this being an art world, is just like the really obvious one of he's literally giving his guts over for his art. I mean, maybe there's no way to pick it apart than that because it's so obvious, but
filling his guts, literally.
Yeah. Well, my takeaway of that, and why I'm so glad that they made him an artist and that's his medium is like himself, is that there's the resistance to allow this process to come to fruition and have him change into whatever this new evolved thing means. He has to let go of his own art, right? And that, in a way, is his livelihood, and therefore is wrapped up in the sort of the concepts of capitalism, right? Like this is his livelihood. And so I feel like you could make the case to say that this is also a commentary on how we could potentially benefit from letting go of those types of constructs, the capitalistic sort of like, we're doing it to survive. Like in order for him to survive, ultimately, he has to let go of the thing that is his moneymaker, metaphorical and literal.
Right. So, and if look at it through then that lens I was putting at, is if that is what is making him sick, is removing the organs. Perfect, yeah.
But he's also this mole, like that whole angle of being in the like what do you call it, an informant?
Yeah.
Is so strange to me because what's his goal?
I have thoughts about that. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay.
For the next section.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know though, that at the same time that does set the mood of, it feels like the sort of the zeitgeist of us being a symptom addressing, society and approach to issues. Like he's just doing the one thing he knows how, and that is why, I don't know, it is kind of powerful by the ending to see him take the bar in that sense, whether it's good or not. I don't know. It's you see he's kind of working through some stuff, so I picked up on that and I thought it fit the mood.
Well, the what would you call the beds and the chair and the bioreceptive machine things, right? I love this dual sort of ambiguity of that, like visually they look organic, and that, but they aren't, right? Like they're biomechanical, I guess. And having them be these sort of weird, organic looking things makes, I think, our brains potentially think, oh, that's good, right? Like that's good marketing is what it ends up being. And they feel like that theme gets pushed, that, you know, like they're just machines that need to be tinkered with and dialed in. They're not actually necessarily good for us as humans, because they're arresting the evolution of the people that's going on. Like, their purpose is actually not to make you feel like, it's to make you feel better on the most surface level. But that, like you said, is just a symptom catcher. And so I like this connection that brand, you know, it's a business that is selling these things for people to feel better, like the business of healthcare, right? Which is so ironic, right? Because healthcare in the States in particular is not really healthcare. It's more like, it's not even death prevention either, right? Like, it's this weird other thing. And so having the thing that's supposed to read your, like, I don't know, make you feel more comfortable is just, it's just a serviceable product from a big corporation.
Yeah, with its fans too.
Yeah,
well,
with its fans.
With its like cronies that I guess kill people that threaten the business model.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, I was like, oh, this is sort of like, this is Amazon down the road, right? Like, eventually Amazon is selling us products that tell us that we're cool.
Well,
that
it's
we're
not
good.
even Amazon down the road. It's like Apple products now.
Yeah.
I mean, we all, you know ourselves and know David Cronenberg's all into the idea of technology. iPhones are just, you know, an extension of ourselves. They're a next stage in evolution. They're going to be, you know, from the iPhone 21 to 22, it's going to be the difference between holding one to being in our arm or whatever.
And of course, those corporations, you know, if we keep on the path we're on right now, those corporations are the ones who are, I mean, this is already true, obviously, with lobbying in the States and stuff, but globally, those corporations become the arbiters of, you know, like squashing the resistance.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that also that these devices kind of cradle and comfort and soothe like a human body that is naturally uncomfortable and in pain and like is not in harmony with its environment. Because I think a lot of the way we use technology, especially right now, is like as a self-soothing method. You know, when we open our iPhone 10 times a day or, you know, 50 times a day to look at Instagram and Twitter one more time, there's a kind of a quick dopamine self-soothing function there. So it does, yeah, it really gets at the idea of there's a bigger root problem and kind of we're not in harmony with things, and all we can do is kind of self-soothe the symptoms. So this all points to, you know, this movie is really thematically rich and there's so much to discuss about it. But man, I just wish the surface story carried me through a bit better, but that's for the next section. So
Okay.
Yeah.
These butts hanging on to you. I mean, just a bit more on on this, that our relationship with technology, and just something that's like so specific with Cronenberg, it feels like, and I just like, I love so much, is how the technology itself, it's like not as it's not like they aren't like iPads and iPhones because of that organic quality, yet the people interact with them as assuredly as we do with iPhones, iPads. It just sort of twists. It's like it's like real but not, and twist it just in that such of a way where like when we like see kids who just know how to instinctively work an iPad, it just makes me go like, wait, is that weird that they can do that at all? You know, because it's like you get that visual where it's like they're pressing that weird like looks like a spinal light bright flesh thing. It's just like
the control panel where you just kind of massage it to do surgery.
But us looking at it, it's like, how the hell would you know what thing to push at any given point? But the way they do it so assuredly, it just like
Biofeedback, baby.
Yeah. It just does so much to highlight our technology with our relationship with our technology.
Can I say one last thing that I liked?
Yeah, I mean, I have got a lot more.
You do? Great.
Yeah.
This is sort of also related to what I was saying before about the sort of ambiguity and irony of all the characters and whatnot, but how they present the mother who obviously in the opening kills her own child, right? Like something that our society has used as weaponized quite a lot politically, right? Like the sort of using the reaction or the visceral reaction that gives us, the idea of killing a child as the opening scene, and then like having her be this, presented essentially as this sort of monster throughout, and yet having her calling her own son the monster and the creature, I think is the term she uses specifically. I just think that this whole movie and Cronenberg is so good at creating that weird sort of, I don't know what a good term for it exactly would be, but everything is almost a double-edged, double entendre, flipped somehow on its head thing. And I just like this upside downness that he's so good at.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll just say, since you mentioned it, that opening scene like had me so hooked from the get-go, just because it's so unique. Like,
he starts eating the wastebasket.
Yeah. It's just okay. Like I was just on board from there. And it's just with films, I don't know. It's just always seemed this way, and yet thankfully there are still films that surprise me. It's just always like, what else can we do? What more is there? And then just to have an intro like that, just with that kind of imagery and context, is biting into that side of the trash can. I'm like, hey, here we are. Awesome. We had mentioned, the overall mood which I'll say was great for me and multifaceted. That came from the richness of the world, I thought. Like the Greece setting, or not the setting, but where they shot it. Where like, yeah, Alex, you described it as like maybe a near future, but I could just see it as it's just an alternative reality too,
Sure.
It's just anything. So that was great. And so more on mood, and maybe this is an early rebuttal to, I don't know what could be a potential, doesn't work for any of us, but just the kind of, it's like meandering in a good way, where it's like I want to get caught up in this just dream like feel, which was kind of like, his film Crash, and actually a lot like Eastern Promises and History of Violence, where it's just kind of, you just settle into just this kind of, okay, I don't know, it's like unsettling, you can't take your eyes off of it, and just that mix of moods just feels like, gives me that feeling of like, oh yeah, I just had a weird dream. It was like really interesting, and part of that is just, as that mood, it comes from, I don't know, like we touched on the performances, but just a multi approach to setting that mood.
Agreed. I kind of felt like an analogy would be, although he does it in other films, but he has this kind of rhythm to a lot of his films that's sort of more like waves, or not even like waves crashing, just like sort of like undulating.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than, a film like, I don't know, let's say something really different, like Mad Max Fury Road, which just seems like a constant upward crescendo, right? It's just like running up each stair at every beat. And so I don't know that I have a preference. Obviously, one is more like overt, like one rhythmic style is more overt. But I agree that there is something kind of hypnotic about this particular style.
Yeah.
Which then when it ended, I was like, oh man, it's over?
Or yeah. It's kind of, whoa.
But while it was happening, I also was thinking, oh man, this is going a long ways here, and I'm maybe kind of like drifting. I was completely awake and paying attention, but I also felt like I was falling asleep, which is a very strange experience.
Yeah. And you're saying, that was a good thing. Yeah.
I think that's definitely, that's a thing that happens in a movie that is not concerning itself with like a really rigid structure where we have to have constant dynamics and a constant rising action towards a very clear climax and then like the resolution. So that's why a movie like this, when it ends, you're like, oh, that was the ending, because I wasn't getting the unconscious cues of like, okay, the third act definitely just happened and now we're into the finale. It's like, well, that could have been the last scene, or maybe it couldn't have been. Who knows? Which is not a good or bad thing. And I like a lot of movies that give you that floaty, wavy, undulating feeling that you're describing.
Is that happening more often now, or am I just personally watching more of those movies now?
Right, with like between Neon Demon and Bad Batch and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like those are two really good examples.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's happening more, but maybe more films are getting more budget and getting distributed more broadly.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I could think of like the 70s films. I mean, THX 1138,
That's true.
Apocalypse Now, Solaris, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
you're right.
They're out there. Yeah.
Very much so.
It's a thing.
Well, I think it may also, I mean, Cronenberg is not our generation, but of the filmmakers of our generation, we're a lot of us tied to that era of filmmaking for sure. Like we're inspired by it. So it makes sense that, people like Nick Refn or the woman who did the one you just mentioned.
Anna Lily Amirpour.
Yeah, thank you. Like, I get it. So cool. I like these. I like this style.
Yeah, the we're the generation that's equally inspired from those films and Star Wars.
Right.
And Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, you kind of already mentioned it, but last big what worked for me, just to, I guess, second was I was into the performances, and of course, special shout out to Kay Stu and her character. Like, just how you put it, Tim, about Timlin, was that I just love that kind of where it's someone who has like an officious role.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the one that's like most maybe like brimming with just sort of like just their sexuality or just something like that's right there, like ready to burst. And just her doing that like heightened manicness is just so great, so great. And on top of just that as a performances, and maybe this is just to counter kind of how I guess wasn't working for you, you said the head, Alex, was that it does something really interesting with settling into the world building. I don't know, where it's just like almost I don't know. I'll get into it, but it's in I don't know, things of note maybe more, but it's like a doubling down on the sort of normality of, or it's like the movie's just treating the weird crazy stuff about it just so like normally that's almost banal. That I don't know, that's maybe that's not how her character played to you, but it's the commitment that was there behind it. It just somehow meshes with all that, if that makes sense at all.
The movie is not pointing at the bizarreness of the world or the people as, look how bizarre this is. It's just presenting them, and a particularly manic, strange character is not presented as like, look at this weirdo. It's just another person in this universe along with the performance art, and it's all just there.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting, or maybe a better way of putting what I was sort of trying to say earlier, is like when you present judgmentally, then we get to decide, right? Like we're the ones going, oh my God, like I have feelings.
Yeah. Cool. Well, any more what worked for either of you? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Yeah, including favorite moments of yours, maybe we could touch on. We haven't really done that.
So, I mean, one thing that I think I do love about Cronenberg, and was very much there in Existence, is just he captures the like the obscene and like the titillation and like the sexual arousal of like the wrong, like maybe better than any other filmmaker I've seen, where it's just he understands that there is this aspect of human sexuality that is activated by like the idea of like this is wrong, or this is not allowed, or this is in society's eyes is obscene or perverse. Like there is an excitement that is activated in a part of human sexuality by that. And he really exploits that and explores that in his movies, where it's just, you know, we're being presented with bodies and things that are like objectively disgusting and revolting, but we see characters becoming aroused by them, and part of us understands, because it's like, oh yeah, this is a universe where this is the edge, this is the extreme, and it like really clicks in a really uncomfortable way that really presents the audience with that reality of like, we're always going to be seeking the next frontier of extremity in this, like with our human sexuality. And I think it's really, I think it's so interesting the way Cronenberg confronts us with that in his movies.
It's like, okay, we know and accept people with full body tattoos and body modifications, but what about someone sewing ears all over their body? Like, it's not that much of a next step, like when you think about it.
It's all relative. Like arousal can and is relative in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so like, it is true that our brains have that thing in them of like the more sort of stimulating or exciting, depending on like what excites you, like the further and more extreme you get into that, you kind of build a tolerance and you keep getting more and more extreme. Like you see that in all sorts of realms.
That's what this movie feels like, a commentary on the internet as well. And, you know, just,
totally.
You know, just how much of our brains like evolved in maybe completely bizarre and unexpected ways just because of all the stimulus we receive from the internet. You know, we just are so overstimulated in every regard, including sexually. And, you know, what does that do to us? Like, where are we, you know, when we get that much stimulation, what happens to us? And this movie just explores the most extreme edge, where it's like, we're at a place now where pain isn't even a factor. So the hot thing is to put a zipper in your belly. You know, like that's exciting, to unzip your zipper.
Oral sex on it. Yeah, I guess you call it that.
That moment in the theater was just like, wow.
Oh, so good.
yeah. I appreciated the movie went there. Yeah, I expected nothing less. It reminds me of an Existence when there's that moment where I think it's I forget if it's Jude Law or Jennifer Jason Leigh, which one licks the port on the other one.
Yeah.
You know, they have like their, you know, their organic Xbox device that plugs into them, and they got a little port on their body. And Cronenberg knows exactly. He's not afraid to go there. Like what everybody's thinking, he does it. And then you're like, oh God, like, how'd you know to do that? You're right. But that's horrible and disgusting. But also it feels like that's what would happen. It's right. Really, really fascinating, that place he goes to.
You just got me thinking too. It's really interesting how by making this all more like an organic technology, it feels as if like they still have a leg up on us somehow, as far as like in their world, they wouldn't have a meme about how everyone is, you know, on their phones, getting sucked into their phones, not talking to each other next to each other anymore. Like that's more distinctly our world, is that like screen separation. Yeah, I don't know, that like sucked into the screen is unhealthy thing. It's interesting.
Now that I think about it, you're so right that it's absolutely an alternate reality, because the technology is different. You know, people are using camcorders and old-fashioned cameras, and there's a CRT, like, you know, old tube TV as part of the performance art. Yeah. So yeah, it's a iPhone-less world.
Interesting.
It's as if an alternate reality where as soon as we reach the most modern technology we do see in the film, like organic technology just became the thing. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. It feels like a 90s movie.
Yeah, I mean,
in a weird way.
To jump ahead to things of note, it was written in the late 90s.
Oh, well,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Cool. I loved that scene with Kay Stu, like, I guess trying to seduce him or whatever, where she's like moving closer and closer to him, and then
corners him in the office.
Yeah. It's so good. Cool. Any other little scenes you want to shout out?
I really, just the slicing and dicing, I guess, sex scene, if you will, was pretty exciting to watch, because I'm not very squeamish with that stuff, but I think being in the theater with other people watching it was exciting. That's more what I'm getting at, is that you could feel people in the theater being like, I don't like this, which is fun to be around.
Yeah.
We are the people in those performance art spaces in the movie. We are those weirdos enjoying the show.
I think one guy walked out of my screening.
Great.
So I'm pretty sure he did not come back.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Got him.
Great. With all that, then, I think we can move on to our next section here. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
So I kind of hinted at this earlier, but it's hard with a movie like this because it feels like the movie's intent, it's not really worrying about the thing I'm about to talk about, which is just like, I love a movie that can both give me the thematic richness we're pointing to, the symbols, all the discussions that can happen afterwards, but then also bothers to give me a compelling through line with the main characters, and I think this movie was disorienting in good ways, but also in ways that didn't feel really like carefully constructed or like really intentional, where we just jumped to a scene. Saul was always meeting with his police contact kind of out by like a shipwreck or something. We just jumped to that setting, and we'd kind of suddenly be thrown into a world in which he's an informant, but we never really get a feel for why or what his goal is, or like what, like his body is changing and he doesn't like that, but like how is informing on this community going to help that naturally occurring evolutionary situation? And there's a lot of this movie did feel like we just kind of jumped around to different scenes in which I was kind of asked to just take it at face value, and these characters are going to do this now. But until really the Scott Speedman character became more prominent and we got into this idea of this revolution of people who are modifying their bodies to eat plastic and think that's the way of the future, that then I felt a directionality to the film. I just wish that the other parts of the film added up in that way. And I think there are parts of the film that just felt a little bit almost like Cronenberg just was uninterested in worrying about that. And so he'll jump into a scene with a cop or whatever, and I don't feel like this is like a real scene between people that came in from another scene and came in with motivation. They're just kind of here to say what they got to say in the scene to then go to like the next kind of cool Cronenberg scene. And it was just an unfortunate, like, I could see how this movie could have it all. Like there's enough here that it could have it all. There is, the plot does go to interesting places and has this kind of conspiracy thing going on. And it just didn't quite put the effort in to pull me through in a way that felt, I don't know, like it added up, or that one scene connected to the next. And that's not to say I don't like wandery movies. I like Mulholland Drive is one of my favorite films of all time. But in that film, there's something about the the construction of the wandering and the mood and the dreaminess that all feels exactly perfect. And I think just a lot of scenes in this movie, they didn't feel perfect in that way. They kind of were just landing with a dud. And then I go to another scene that I thought was like awesome, and then a scene kind of landed with a dud. And so that was my overall. That's why I ended up more on the stream side for me. Was it was close to being a great wandering movie, and felt like it was a movie that was there to be discussed and to have themes and images and moods. All that's great, and it's just like you were so close to also having a story that could pull me through in a really, compelling way. And it's almost like that just wasn't the priority, and so it was kind of like the last piece that wasn't integrated with the rest of it. So that's my overall feeling. But obviously that's not the goal of every movie, and this movie has led to already a really fascinating discussion. So it's doing a lot of things right, and maybe a compelling plot that pulls me through scene to scene isn't what it really cares about.
Yeah. I kind of feel you, like, especially with whatever reason this was, meeting in the alley scenes, I'll call it, with the informant. I did find like I just kind of either kind of tune out, or which at first is kind of fine, but then when it's like we have a scene just like it where we're kind of like, oh, we're back here again, we're back here again, we're back here again. I agree that was adding to the slog in a not good way for me. But I'm always going to clarify this with my butt, where I'm like, okay, though, now that I know what it is and I'll rewatch it, like there'll be enough more context for the world and story for me that like whatever they're talking about will just have a sort of richness that I'm really sitting up in my seat for, or it's just something that's like, okay, there's actually is more story going on here, because I just would kind of tune out, and I don't know, I find that often happens.
That's where I was clocking, especially in those meeting up in alley scenes. Like I was zoning out, that's usually when I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Like I shouldn't be zoning out, but I am.
Yeah.
I definitely wonder about that storyline, because it almost does feel like an element from like a previous draft that got like that storyline kind of got chopped down or out mostly, but they tried to sort of retain some of it, so you had this counterpoint that represented like the Big Brother world out there, but it doesn't feel quite right. And I think part of why it doesn't feel right is because if you are an informant, if you are in that sort of that brings automatic stakes to you as a character. And it doesn't seem like that plays out in any real way for him as a character. Like, he doesn't become suddenly under threat because of the reveal to anybody that he is an informant. So that's not a part of it. And it's not like another movie that feels kind of in the same like meandering thing, but like specifically has a through line is like the conversation, where you do have this guy with a point of view who's trying to figure a thing out. Like nobody's really seems to be trying to figure a thing out in this movie.
Yeah.
And yet he does.
What's the cop's goal? What is ultimately the goal of the state in this movie?
To track down Scott Speedman?
Right. In the latter half, that is where I can start to grok what's going on. I'm like, okay, so there is this movement to, I guess, accept evolution and eat plastic. But like, even that is like, why, like, what does the state know about that? And what is the problem with that actually? Like what is the state's philosophy that is so opposed to some people eating plastic?
Well, actually, so, okay, hang on. I've just had a revelation. Not that I think this doesn't like read particularly well, at least off of the first viewing, but remember that the cop is the person who says, we got to the kid's body first. Between the point of the mom telling Scott Speedman that she had killed him and Speedman showing up and taking the body, the authorities got to the body first, and they planted all of the organs with tattoos in the kid.
Mm-hmm.
So really what the movie is saying is that what's the main character's name? Tensor? Yeah. Right. Saul, what they're saying is that Saul is a total patsy the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't even, like, he thinks he's doing something for the greater good or whatever. But doesn't he say at some point, he's like, I'm just doing this to, like, he has some line.
He says something just kind of vague about, like, he thinks it's wrong that, like he doesn't like what's happening to his body, right? Like,
right.
He just doesn't like how things are now. It was what I got.
So he thinks that he is using the authorities in a way, like, for his own self-gain.
Yeah.
But in reality, the whole time he was just being used by them to get to this point, to have this public thing. Like, they used him as a propagandist.
Right.
That's their goal. But that's not great. It's not super strongly like the hammer does not come down where you go, oh shit, they got him.
Yeah.
It doesn't click into place. And I think what's frustrating about it is, like I think I said before, you're close, because yes, that's a great setup to, you think this is the premier performance artist in this space. That's the person that is dedicated to this kind of, weird new frontier of body horror art. To have them be an informant and to be actually against whatever this movement is, this avant-garde thing, great. That's an awesome setup. And then, but what are the stakes? What happens if he's found out as an informant? What does he hope the authorities are going to do with the information he gives them? Does he envision a world in which all performance art of this type ends because he thinks it's actually wrong? Like, what are his morals that are leading him to lead this double life? So yeah, that's where it's just like, yeah, there's a beginning of a great compelling surface story here that would be awesome, because then that would really suck me in and pull me through, and you wouldn't have to jettison any of the vibe, mood, think piece elements. So yeah, it's just kind of like I wish that had been invested in a bit more, because you've almost got it all, and it's just almost there.
And it sounds like if it had those things that are missing for you, that would have just ultimately added up to clearer stakes, maybe, is what it comes down to.
Well, I think I just would have been more invested in my experience of watching the movie, and just been more at attention, I think I wouldn't have those periods of the movie where I go into a lull that didn't feel like a intentional lull. They just felt like lulls where I was like losing interest.
Right. I was just trying to see if that could be just also described as clearer stakes, what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I think clearer stakes and clearer motivations for the characters, so that I am on edge, maybe in a scene where I'm worried that Saul Tensor is going to be found out as an informant, but that could still be the exact same scene with the exact same other stuff going on, the exact same symbols and thematics. But I'm also on the edge of my seat, because I know what he wants and I know what this person wants. So I think I'm always a fan of movies that can do it all. That's always my thing. So if you don't have to sacrifice your mood or your vibes to also give me a really compelling surface story, like give me it all, man. And there's a balance, because obviously if you invest too much in just like up in the ante of the stakes, then yeah, you're going to lose some of the mood. So yeah, it's a balancing act. But I think there's a few tweaks you could make to this script that could make it a more balanced experience that I would have preferred.
I think it's missing an element that, say, Brundlefly has, which is like, in The Fly, we really, really clearly know what his intentions are, like what he's going for. And you see that just disintegrate, and he turns into this other thing. But his actual intentions and motivations never change, right? Like he has a clear goal, and kind of circumstance changes around him, but he stays very kind of like one track. And I'm not saying that a character has to stay on one track by any means, but when you don't have a clear sense of what at least his initial goal is, I think it's hard for us to get on board. Now, having said that, I also wonder if that's sort of a product of how a person like Cronenberg at an older age views the world, because this is also an older character, right? Like, this isn't a young, ready to go, like, change the world scientist. It's this artist who's been suffering for a long, long time. And so, okay, that's cool, but I still feel like not having the intention somehow in there for us to chew on, it does hurt the overall, like, I don't know, path.
Yeah. And maybe this isn't so much as an excuse because a first viewing should be a good first viewing, but I just feel like maybe I think it is all there. It's just,
maybe
I'm going to miss it because of whatever.
Because you're distracted by what's the actress's name?
Kay-Sue?
No, not Kay-Sue, the other actress.
Leia.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
She's pretty distracting. She's so unique.
Yeah.
And her performance is really, I don't know, it's almost hypnotic in a way.
Maybe it's not just her, but like when you're just taking in the weird chair that they're in, and more so just all the themes that we were talking about. It's like my brain is flying all over the place that I'm gonna miss some little piece of dialogue on a first viewing that could help elucidate where it has attitudes and goals are at.
The one other thing that I'm on the fence about is, so there's like this movie feels like a 90s movie in a lot of ways, including the way that Cronenberg, creates his technology. There's something about the devices that feels very 80s, very 90s, which on the one hand feels totally right. And I like, and it feels that's almost how I know it's a Cronenberg movie, is because the fleshy devices feel old in that way. But then part of me like wishes that he was a little bit better with CGI or with special visual effects, and could give me a 2022 version of old Cronenberg, like just a little bit extra, where the chair isn't just obviously just like a very simple puppet that just has like a couple moving parts, but like I just the part of me that just wants like the full-on movie experience wishes that there was a new, just like slightly more advanced Cronenberg goo machine that I could see. And I feel like I was getting like a retro throwback, which was fun. And like, I get it and I like it, but it's like, oh man, I have seen this before, this kind of aesthetic. And I was just like, just wishing there was like a little extra 2022 magic on top of it. Like they could sell it a bit more. Like when they're attaching like the arms of his like cradle bed to him, I'm just like, you're just attaching like this unmoving like static putty stuff. Like this is not really a thing. And I wish that it was like grabbing him as they put it on him, or just like so a little extra something to like give me a little like, ooh yeah, like this is a movie and like this is a real thing.
It's funny because I think he was kind of excited to use CG, but it was only in the sense of like, oh, we can use CG to replicate how this, basic looking, or, this non-CG looking thing is, versus combining them is kind of what you're
right.
saying.
Yeah. I wish there was like, because there's some directors that are really masterful at still retaining what feels like an 80s or 90s aesthetic as far as things feeling all, practical, but knowing how to use just a little enhancement to just edge it over into the magic side of things, and not just like so clearly a practical object or a bad CGI.
It's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy, and I don't think Cronenberg is that interested also in like pushing the envelope with visual effects.
Yeah.
But just selfishly, I would love to see Cronenberg objects rendered in the best possible technology.
Totally. That'd be awesome.
Great. Well, that's it for what did not work. I feel like we can have some fun things of note here. You guys ready for that?
Sure.
Cool. All right, here we go. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Just because it's kind of going off of stuff we were just saying that I thought was interesting about how this fits into his career and just sort of like keeping track of the evolution of his style and like what he might be interested in at any given point and just not, care about by now. He's just doing his thing. It's just so interesting because like Shivers, which we watched, is like pure B-movie, like high premise horror. It's like a slug induced zombie outbreak in a high rise apartment, right? And that's what happens, and sure, there's the thematic stuff going on too, like all great horror, but it's primarily that. And then we shift to the Fly is another good example, all kind of really high premise horror, but then like Videodrome, The Brood, Dead Ringers, and
Naked Lunch.
Well, yeah, that's a little different, but Scanners.
Sure.
That's what I think of, like, that's most familiarly as quintessential Cronenberg, where it's like we have maybe now what's on that far end of where we're at now with like this film of the ideas and weirdness, and which means a lot of things, but to keep it short, combined with like there'll be some sort of chase aspect or like clearer antagonist bad guy of the corporation, and someone's getting privy to it all. I don't know. It's just really interesting, I guess, to sum up how I feel like there's the extreme end of Shivers, the extreme end of Crimes of the Future, and you can clearly see the in-between in his middle films.
Oh, yeah. He did Kronos too, right?
No, that's Guillermo del Toro.
I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. There's like a beetle.
Yeah, I think that's
that the
Kronos,
that's the Del Toro one.
Naked Lunch has
Naked Lunch. I love Naked Lunch.
That's kind of
it's
the
one of my
exception,
favorite
though.
movies.
I guess to what I was saying, as far as that's like completely like what the hell is going on at a certain point. I'd be curious for you to see more of some of his work, Alex.
Yes, no, me too. I would like to go back and see more of his work because he is really interesting, and I do like subversive films, and I remember Videodrome. I did like, and because it went to these places of just the body and the porousness of the body, and like both the grotesquerie but also the sexuality of it, and I do find that space that he operates in really interesting.
Cool. You have seen that one. Great. I'd love you to see Crash too.
Yes, Crash is probably the next one I was thinking about watching, just because it's been compared a lot. It gets brought up a lot when people are discussing this movie.
Okay.
Maybe because it also premiered at Cannes and also had like walkouts and stuff.
Yeah.
The Brood could go on and on. Well, Alex, our guest, did you have any things of note that you brought to the table here?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to note was Scott Speedman. Just like when his name came up in the opening credits, I was like, Scott Speedman, when was the last time I saw him in anything? And I think it was, do you remember the movie Underworld?
Oh yeah.
There's like, wasn't he like kind of a werewolf, and Kate Beckinsale was like a vampire, and it was like vampires view werewolves kind of a universe.
He was the hybrid.
Or was that, he's the hybrid. Yeah. Something weird. Anyway, that movie came out when, I don't know, it was sophomore in high school or something. And I remember like having a crush on him at the time. So I think I saw that movie like multiple times for some reason, and thinking he was like really cute. So it was like a fun blast back to like high school, when suddenly it was like, oh, that guy. It's like, where's he been? He's been in shows and he's done other things since then, but I just remember him as the guy from Underworld. So
yet not expecting him in this context at all.
Right. Like I would not have thought that that's who you cast to play this role. But he did a good job, and I feel like he actually embodied this kind of sad, grieving father who also has this revolutionary mission. Really interesting casting, and I thought he was well cast. So that was definitely a thing of note, because I did not know he was in this movie, and I didn't know anything about his role or what role he'd play in the story.
Yeah.
I had no idea he was in this movie, but I will say that I suspect that either the casting director for this movie or Cronenberg saw Speedman in the 3rd season of the show You, because he plays essentially a grieving father. And he does a incredibly good job. He's very you're like, oh, whoa, this is a new thing for you, at least new that I had ever seen him do. And he really nailed it. So maybe they were like, this is just grab him. He knows what he's doing for this role.
And I had no idea who he was and didn't recognize him from anything, and don't think I'd ever heard his name before.
You weren't a big, what was his breakout, Felicity or something like that? You didn't see
Underworld 3 times in high school?
Sorry. No.
I'd like to say a thing of note is the score, although I probably should have said it was something that worked, but that it's Howard Shore, who is an amazing composer, but he's one of those, I feel like he's one of those composers that you don't know you know. You know what I mean? Like he did
Sounds of the Lambs.
Yeah, Silence of the Lambs, right? Like he's so good.
I mean, Lord of the Rings.
Everybody knows him from Lord of the Rings, but he's done so many other just random movies, which is
I love the score of Big.
No, I was just going to say, Alex, you're kind of our composer guy. I know you're a big Lord of the Rings fan too. So yeah, I thought it's funny. You probably know him, from Lord of the Rings. But then if you go back to this and watch more Cronenberg films, nope, Howard Shore.
Yeah, he's a Cronenberg regular.
It's great.
Yeah.
So I did watch a handful of interviews with different actors and David Cronenberg, and just want to report back on some fun findings. Thought it was really funny where the interviewer was talking to the actors about kind of how it was acting in this, and then also talking to David Cronenberg, sort of addressing some things that the actors brought up. Apparently, Kristen Stewart, she was saying how she just had the feeling where so much of the time, she just didn't know what was going on, or it was kind of hard to keep track of this whole world and this thread, and so she'd kind of have to look for reassurances along the way. It just thought it was so interesting how David Cronenberg put it. He kept he just would just assure the actors that whatever they're doing, that the actors just in general, if they're acting good acting, they're doing something unconsciously, always. And just what I thought was so interesting was how he made the comparison to, hey, that's life really, where sometimes in life you just kind of go around and go, what the hell am I doing? What is it? What am I doing here? And then whatever it is you're doing, though, that is the right thing. And I just thought that was a fun comparison he made.
How did the actors feel about that direction?
Then they said when they watched it, they absolutely loved it, and they got it all then.
Yeah, but there's a type of performance he gets that is really, it's what's the right word for it? Yeah, the actors they're there in the scene and they're delivering their lines and they're emoting and they're feeling, but it doesn't feel highly focused, I guess is maybe the word for it, in a good way. It creates that vibe of we're all kind of floating along here and not really sure where we are, and the performances also kind of add to that vibe, whether the actors realize it or not.
Well, it's interesting because there's actually a mix going on where Viggo, Mr. Mortensen, on the other hand, he said he perfectly understood the story and the character and everything that was happening at any given moment. But what he said was that because the shoot in Greece, it was over 100 degrees every day, and just everything about it was this kind of hot, sweaty, just kind of atmosphere, which of course they were all getting excited about as for the film sense that gave the film that atmosphere. But what he said that I thought was interesting, what it did for his acting was it made it so each line was very deliberate and he was very present with it because it was all he could really focus on at any given time because of those physical conditions. So I think that carried through the performance, and that carried through for this mood of like the sleepy gumshoe or some scenes, like whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting to hear Cronenberg give his take kind of on iPad technology, because of course already talked about, and like you can kind of guess, it's an extension of ourselves, like we'd said. But it was cool to see him give the take where he thought that an iPad was perfectly suitable to watch a film on. As opposed to needing a theater screen, because he said it's like a book. It's still really immersive because the resolution is super good and high. The colors are good, but what's unique about it as opposed to a bigger screen is you're holding it right up to your face. And so he says that combined with you still have good sound, then that does the trick.
I agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
a good iPad with a good pair of headphones, that's a great way to watch a movie.
Yeah, it's cool. And then this is the one I'll recommend that you watch if you're interested. Anyone listening for just a it's a longer interview, of course. It was called Q on CBC was the YouTube channel, so Canadian organization, but it was cool. It was like a full hour interview for the guy to get into it all. Oh yeah, you were curious. I thought it was interesting. He wrote it in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And so like, why now? And so he had put it away thinking, oh, it's no longer relevant. But the producer who he regularly works with came back to him about it and just gave him that classic, well, I think it's more relevant than ever now.
Agreed.
Yeah, totally. And then this was a take on it, which I did not on a story in one of the themes going on. So this was not a main thing. So this is not like, don't read this as like, this is what it's all about. But he went on this kind of explanation about how make a connection to microplastics and gave the statistic that like 80% of people on Earth have, microplastics in their bloodstream. And like, I've heard that and think of that in terms of, well, maybe that's an explanation for a lot of our woes, our health woes. I know there's a woman who's like written a whole book on like that's her guess for the contributing factor for like lowering sperm counts and all that in men. But David Cronenberg, he was just kind of like put it more as but as far as we know, it's there's no real obvious thing going on, so it's really interesting that like we have melded with plastics in that sense. And he also pointed out how how there are bacterias that can eat plastic, and sort of drew that connection as maybe that's a conceivable thing through that for humans to somehow turn it into something we could eat.
We are mostly bacteria.
Yeah, and companies have produced a kind of plastic that we can eat and provides protein. And so he said this all seems ridiculous, but it is the weird reality.
Wow.
It really is like we think our bodies and everything about us can be separate from our environment, but it's all goes in and out, including the plastic.
Yeah, or sometimes stays in.
Yeah,
never leaves us ever again.
Yeah. It was fun to hear him say, oh yeah, real quick, the main impetus out of all these themes for him as the starting point was the idea of body art and permanently altering the body. So if you're curious of this, the thing that really all stemmed from and for how his films often do shut out audiences. I just thought it was so interesting to hear him say, if you make a movie that shuts out any audience members, then that's considered a failure. So it just sort of made me look at this lens of his work as like, in his view, he really is trying to do like all the movie things and not alienate viewers and make his movies like a digestible experience.
He was saying he considers it a failure of a movie if it shuts out an audience member?
Yes. Yes.
Fascinating.
In his eyes, just, you only have your own taste, maybe just really just, goes with what he writes, which is commendable in a certain way. But for him, he's trying to hit that bar. And by his standards, he's doing that, apparently, in all his work.
Wow.
I think this movie could have done it a bit more. It was close.
Yeah. It was cool. The interviewer kind of pressed him on, his interest in why, the darker side and the way he shows that. And Cronenberg was like, I don't see it as darker side, and the interviewer pushed him and was like, wait, come on, really? Like some of these things in your movies? And Cronenberg, he had a really good comeback for that. He said, no, well, the thing is, it's realistic. It's accepting things as reality, just not thinking in terms at all of like dark and light. But yeah, this is just reality. Like that's it. That's not, kind of like we already said, he's not putting a lens of morality or anything over it. And then kind of, last fun thing I had thought that was interesting from that interview. He said this main, like he's atheist, whatever, but his main kind of like view of humanity, the nature of humanity, yada yada, he says that the body is the essence of human existence, which makes so much sense that he would view it that way. It is, he says, like that is like what we are. Like he just really doesn't think in terms of soul and things like that. He's just like everything's the body. And, that's where he also straight up mentioned technology is ultra human, an extension of what we are, and how all that brings out, again, not good or bad, but how all that does just bring out the best and the worst in us. And it is a great, beautiful thing and a horrifying thing.
Yep. Wise man.
All right, then. So to sort of wrap up our things of note, I thought it'd be fun in the spirit of Alex, your podcast, Beyond the Screenplay, to end on some lessons. What is a lesson we learned from this film? Let's end with you, Alex. I'll start because I'm interested in what you say and want to be excited
to
hear what you have to say.
Great.
It was kind of what I already mentioned in the what worked section, but I really latched on to pretty early how when you have just such a strange world, and like how he said how the actors, though, they take it like just, oh no, this is just how it is, this is all banal, this is normal. It's like everything, it's like it doubles down. There's the lesson, to like double down on whatever is the thing that you're doing, if it might be off-putting or sort of hard or sort of new or difficult. Like, no, just take it further. Like have the actors just say more of these crazy things, more of these crazy technologies that are there. Completely different film, but similar lesson used, I guess, was like La La Land, where Damien Chazelle says, okay, I know like musicals are not something that audiences are used to nowadays, so we're going to just start it with the most vibrant, explosive musical number in the whole movie from the get-go. Be like, that's a way to like double down on what it is the movie is doing up front. So that's throughout the movie. You can look at it through that lens, and I love that, and this is good, interesting takeaway. Tim.
Mine's kind of similar, actually. In watching this and thinking about Cronenberg's films and why I like them, I kind of realized that, like, I've made a handful of films now, and in every case, to some extent, I've kind of, for lack of a better term, played it safe. And I'm getting to this point now where I'm realizing, especially because I'm inspired by Cronenberg in particular, that like you really, really, or I really need to swing for the fences and like go for the craziest version of the thing I want to make, and like just push for that. Because like, even with the film that I'm finishing right now, which I'm very proud of, and I'm really excited about what we did, there's a part of my brain that watches it now and goes, oh, but we could have gone so like, I'm not saying a little further. I'm saying we could have gone into like another stratosphere with the exact same premise, setup, themes, all of the above, and gone completely nuts with it. And like had these sort of Cronenberg-esque, like monstery sort of like practical effects, crazy stuff happening. And it's the same film. It would just be this, it's like the completely nuts swing for the fences version of that film. And I think that for me, he's always been one of those people who was just already doing that. And as a filmmaker, the types of films I think I'm most inspired by and want to make are ones where you really are leading with that attitude. I'm going to go completely for the nutso version of this thing that I've been, trying to create. And yes, you can ratchet it back to a degree, but like swing for the fences for sure.
Alex.
This movie ends really well, I think. I think it's a great example of how to do a slightly ambiguous ending, but end on exactly the right note to have your audience walk out in that thought-provoked mood and to discuss. And I just love the restraint and the perfection of the final scene, where you've got the buildup of she's recording him as he does this maybe final performance art moment of his life if he dies from eating this plastic toxic waste bar, and just ending on the shot of his expression and the tear in his eye is just like great, because it can be read so many ways. It can be read as relief, as finally I am embracing my body as it is, as a plastic eating machine, and I'm no longer fighting it and I feel relief. Or it's like I feel relief of like dying, or whatever. It's just a beautiful final moment that doesn't answer any questions. We don't get a confirmation of if he lived or died or what his reality is moving forward. It just ends on that perfect moment. And I love when a movie knows where to end and how to end. And this movie definitely knew how and where to end.
Is there a specific lesson as far as how it did that? Can you put it that way?
I think it raised a clear question. Raised a clear question of is he indeed one of these people that is naturally evolving to eat plastic, basically? Has he been fighting this natural evolution? I think the Scott Speedman character explicitly says that. He's like, are you fighting what is naturally trying to happen? And that final scene is framed as kind of like it is a culmination of his character arc in a way, because if his character arc is going from somebody who is fighting what his body's doing to him, he is removing the organs, he's against this thing that is happening. The ending is him kind of coming to acceptance or coming to peace with it, and that's what matters. And so I appreciate that the final image of the movie is that expression of peace, of acceptance, of like kind of relief. And that's the answer. That's the thing that matters, not whatever happens next, or if he was indeed able to eat the plastic and digest it properly. Cool. And I love when a movie knows how to end on that note, as opposed to the literal kind of, here's the literal answer to the story note.
That's what I was saying earlier, the Graduate type ending.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, Alex. Well, you're already talking here. How about you want to give us a recommendation, is how we like to fully wind down here.
I just rewatched The Northman last night on 4K Blu-ray and just continue to really appreciate that movie and Robert Eggers as a filmmaker. And you were just talking, Tim, about, you appreciate when directors just go hard or go all the way or go nuts. And The Northman is my favorite kind of movie in some ways, because it's a director who knows that he's working with a big enough budget that it's got to be like somewhat accessible. But he's like, if I'm going to make a Viking movie, it is going to feel like what Viking consciousness must have felt like, which is extreme in every way. And I just love how hard he goes in all aspects of that movie, and really embraces just the like amoral darkness of it all. And yeah, just deeply appreciate him as a filmmaker, and The Northman is this great example of a really interesting director getting a hold of a lot of money and spending it to make, I think, a vision with a lot of integrity.
Mine segues too well from that. I gotta, recommend Dead. I'm so bummed I missed it in theaters. I really wanted to see it in theaters, but just rented it. The new Michael Bay joint, Ambulance.
Oh no!
I am so curious about this movie because I've heard it's like Twitter is a buzz about it.
It's the one where Michael Bay discovers drones.
Yes, the trailers have lots of like the tiny drone is flying between objects and through this building, and
it's like as if they were ever made for any filmmaker, you know. But as far as just like it's just exactly how you're putting Alex, like a full crazy, you know, does it all experience. What do you want from this? But then I mean he's Michael Bay, he's doing his thing, and we get all the practical effects to boot that are just so much fun for it. And LA set's always cool. Anyway, I won't go on.
The trailer was such a quintessential Michael Bay experience, but in the best part of Michael Bay, not the worst part.
There's a worst part of Michael Bay.
I mean, Transformers sequels. I don't know.
I'll always give him props for being a filmmaker who's has a style and as imitable and
Bayhem.
Yeah,
sure.
Anyway, I don't want to make this a Michael Bay defense. Tim, what was your recommendation?
Well, you know, I was hoping beyond hope that it would be the new Obi-Wan series, but it's not, because I didn't really like what I've seen of the Obi-Wan series enough. But also on Disney Plus, there's a new Marvel show, Ryan.
It feels like you recommend a new Marvel show every episode now.
We've gotten to that point. Yep.
There's always a new Marvel or a new Star Wars.
Yep.
Which Marvel show now,
yeah,
Tim?
It's Miss Marvel. Okay. Ms. Marvel. Miss M. Yeah. Anyway, so but it's great. It's great, guys. Let me just explain to you that this is the first Pakistani superhero, okay? And she's a teenage girl from New Jersey, and she's Muslim, and she's just trying to get by in the world. And that, the inclusivity and the design of this show is so goddamn good. It's crazy. I was going in thinking this show's not for me. Like, I'm not the demo for it, whatever. It's awesome. Like, it's integrating visuals in very much a sort of similar way that Into the Spider-Verse did, which is an animated movie, right? And this is not animated. So it's doing this integration design thing that is so cool. So visually, it's really, really fun to watch. But thematically and inclusivity and all of these things, it's also really nailing it. So I'm psyched about it. And all the people who were moaning and groaning on Twitter because they thought she didn't have her appropriate power set and that they were dumbing down the character are wrong. And they proved them wrong in the first episode. So shut up.
Got it.
And watch it and enjoy it.
The goddamn discourse.
Yep. Oh, it's cool. It's fun.
Cool. Well, that is it then for episode 181, I believe we are on here.
Sounds
Alex, Thank you so much for joining us. Anything exciting you got going on you want to tell us about?
Nothing much at the moment. Just working.
Yeah, Alex's a podcast is great. I assume you've probably heard it. So
yeah, we are having a blast seeing movies new and old, and I really enjoy that we're keeping that up, and loved coming on this podcast. This was a blast to talk to you guys and to really dig into this movie. And I think I do have a deeper appreciation of it now, and I'm more interested to revisit it than I was before.
Still a stream? You don't want to change that?
I would, you know what? I think I want to watch it again to get whatever else I can out of it. And I would pay $3.99 for that.
Ding, 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 ding,
Hey.
ding. All right, triple rent,
Triple
folks.
rent.
Triple rent.
Cool.
It evolved over the course of the podcast.
Great.
Sometimes it does. Just like those organs inside of you.
Totally.
I grew a new organ.
Well, we'll be back next episode where Tim's going to recommend Dead She-Hulk.
That's very likely.
All right, everyone. So, in closing, whether or not you are fighting what is naturally trying to happen, thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.